If you hold SCP-093 and touch a mirror, the glass doesn't break. It ripples like water. When you step through, you aren't in your room anymore. You are in a world where the sky is the color of a bruise, and something massive is crawling across the horizon.
Item number SCP-093, Object Class Euclid. Special containment procedures are as follows. SCP-093 is to be kept on a silver-backed mirror at all times in a 10 by 10 by 10 foot cell. This cell must be situated on a pedestal at least 1.2 meters high.
The containment area is to be monitored by no fewer than 2 Level 3 personnel at all times. Under no circumstances is SCP-093 to be removed from its mirror or handled without a formal procedure and a designated Class D test subject.
Any changes in the color of SCP-093 must be reported immediately. If the object displays a color not previously recorded, all personnel must evacuate the testing chamber until the object returns to its baseline red state.
SCP-093 is a primarily red disk carved from a material resembling cinnabar. It is covered in unknown circular engravings and symbols of an unidentified language. Unlike normal stone, the object's color changes when it is held by different individuals. The base color is red, but it has been observed turning blue, green, violet, yellow, and even white.
The anomaly's primary property manifests when it is brought into contact with a mirror. When the holder of SCP-093 touches a mirrored surface, the object appears to sink into the glass, and the mirror surface transforms into a portal. This portal leads to a destination that seems to depend on the color the disk has assumed.
While the destination appears to be a physical location on a planet similar to Earth, the reality on the other side is fundamentally broken. The following are summarized reports from the exploration logs of SCP-093.
The Blue Test. Subject was a Class D male. Upon touching the mirror with SCP-093, which had turned a deep sapphire blue, the mirror became a portal to a landscape covered in a thick blue-tinted mist. The subject stepped through. He found himself in a desolate urban environment.
The buildings were made of a strange concrete-like material, but lacked any windows or doors on the lower levels. The air smelled of copper and old rot.
As the subject moved through the city, he reported seeing the unclean. These are massive, humanoid entities, often standing over 50 feet tall. They lack lower bodies, instead dragging themselves along the ground with elongated, spindly arms.
They have no facial features, no eyes, no mouths, just smooth, pale skin. They emit a low-frequency hum that causes physical nausea in human observers. Subject was retracted after witnessing an unclean entity crush a transit bus like an aluminum can simply by leaning on it.
The Green Test. The subject was equipped with a remote camera and a lifeline. SCP-093 turned a vibrant emerald green. Upon entering the mirror, the subject found himself in a vast, overgrown rural area. There were farmhouses, but they were distorted.
Inside one house, the subject found a series of journals. They spoke of a holy union and a great cleansing. The writings described a society that had achieved technological marvels through the guidance of a being they called him.
According to the logs, this being provided the world with a tear that cured all diseases and purified the soul. However, those who were deemed sinful or unclean were subjected to a process of purification that turned them into the massive, faceless monsters seen in the Blue Test.
The society eventually collapsed when the tear was spread too thin, and the unclean began to outnumber the humans. The subject discovered a basement filled with a gelatinous green substance that appeared to be alive, pulsating in time with the subject's own heartbeat. The subject was ordered to evacuate immediately. The violet test, SCP-093, took on a deep purple hue. The portal led to a high-tech city, far more advanced than anything currently on Earth. However, the city was dead. The streets were choked with a white, powdery ash. Inside, the walls were covered in screens, still flickering with propaganda loops. The videos showed a man in white robes claiming that the Lord's work was nearly complete and that the world would soon be free of the flesh. In a high-security lab, the subject found records of Project 093. It revealed that this world's version of the Foundation had actually worked with the religious leadership to facilitate the apocalypse. They were trying to create a God seed by distilling the essence of thousands of human beings.
The resulting stench, as the logs called it, was so potent it began to dissolve the fabric of their reality. The subject reported that the walls of the spire began to bleed a violet liquid, and the unclean were heard scratching at the exterior of the building.
The yellow test. The disc turned a bright, sickening yellow. The subject stepped into a desert, but it wasn't sand. The ground was composed of pulverized human bone. In the distance, a massive structure was visible, a tower that reached past the clouds.
The subject approached the tower and found it surrounded by thousands of unclean. They weren't moving, they were kneeling. The subject noticed that these entities were leaking a foul-smelling yellowish fluid from their torsos.
The subject entered the tower's base and found a series of glass vats. Inside the vats were human beings kept alive in a state of perpetual agony, their bodies being slowly dissolved to create the fluid. A voice over the intercom system began to repeat, "The king is thirsty."
The subject panicked and fled. Upon his return, he refused to speak for 3 days before committing suicide in his cell.
The final logged exploration is the red test. This was conducted by a Foundation researcher who took SCP-093 and entered the portal without authorization. When the researcher returned, he was covered in the violet fluid and his hair had turned white. He was carrying a series of documents. The documents tell the full story. This other world was once like ours. Then he arrived, a being from a higher plane who promised eternal life and the erasure of sin. He gave them the tear, which was actually a highly infectious, reality-altering pathogen. But he wasn't a god. He was a scavenger. He fed on the suffering of an entire civilization. The unclean are his cattle, and the world is his slaughterhouse. The researcher's final note was a warning. SCP-093 is not just a key, it is a beacon. Every time we use it, every time we open a mirror, he notices us. The unclean are slow, but they are patient. They have already consumed one Earth. They are looking for another. The researcher claimed that he could still hear him whispering through the glass of his observation window. SCP-093 remains in containment. However, recent reports indicate that the mirror it rests upon has started to show a slight discoloration. Testing is suspended indefinitely. We are no longer looking into their world. We are making sure they can't look into ours. Subscribe for more Foundation archives.